The Bicycle Industry Retailer and Supplier Best Practices Panel was formed just earlier this year in 2024 as an advocacy effort of the NBDA to unite the industry to take action to formulate best practices for retailers and suppliers going forward. Times are interesting right now. Excessive inventory, poor margins, reduced foot traffic, changing technology, human resource issues, consumer spending habits changing, inflation. There's a lot happening. And this is prompting both retailers and suppliers alike to meet, unite, and have conversations to bring proactive thoughts on solutions to facilitate global level supplier and retailer financial positive health. The NBDA is thankful to our panel members who do make the time to come to these quarterly meetings and address issues, topics that have been provided to us from our NBDA membership base and from the industry at large. The topics vary each time and could include conversation around supplier health, retailer health, D2C, human resources, ridership numbers, marketing, cycling in general, and just that change in consumer spending habits. Thank you to the panel members who are here today. If you're joining as a viewing participant, we welcome your participation by placing questions into the question function, or you can use the chat function. Throughout today's event, panel members and the NBDA will monitor this, and some questions, your questions will be answered live, while other questions our panel members will chat back to you. Assisting in the moderation of today's event is NBDA Board Chair Peter Henry, and Peter will open us up with a few words for the group and the participants in general. Peter? Oh, Peter, you're on mute. Sorry, apologies. Peter, still, sorry.
Oh,
there we go.
Okay. Yeah, my audio for some reason didn't work, so I had to phone in. So I'm doing some new things here. Okay, thank you, Heather. Thank you, panelists, for being here, and thank you those of you who are tuning in. Thank you for showing up. So our overall theme here is partnerships, and I was just reflecting that a successful partnership first requires trust, and trust can only be earned and built over time. But beyond that, a successful partnership also requires planning, both individual planning and joint planning. And one obstacle I'm seeing to that going on is having realistic expectations. There are things that can be planned by a local retailer. They're different in nature from the things that can be planned by a national supplier. On the other hand, often each party has the information that's needed by the other party to do its own planning. And for too long, we haven't really shared that information. And without that, then really neither of us can even learn how to do planning. And if we can't do our own planning, how the heck are we going to do joint planning? So there is a lot of work to do here. But it starts with the first steps, and we're taking those necessary steps here today. Suppliers, for example, need to plan their specific inventory by 6 months, a year, and more before it's ever going to be purchased by a consumer. Retailers, on the other hand, need to be planning to have their staff, their stores ready to, one by one, put customers onto bikes that fit their body, their height, their weight, their fitness level, also fit the conditions for riding in their local area, the opportunities for riding in the local area, how the customer is going to interact with them. There are all kinds of things that need to be just right about the bike to make that a good experience for that customer. And yeah, you need to be, retailers are planning how to do that better next year, right today. And retailer trying to plan exactly what they're going to be buying 6 months from now would be foolhardy, would be counterproductive, would really put them, trying to rely on such a plan could even put them into financial jeopardy because it's not really part of what a retailer should be doing. even in planning at the levels that retailers do, that planning is being done without knowing which customers are going to walk in any given week or any given month, and they don't know what products are going to be available in any given week or any given month. So you get unknowns on both sides, and you're supposed to come up with something that's going to work. Not really possible, and since it's not really possible to do that well, most retailers give up on even trying and never really learn how to do planning at even a medium level. Suppliers are, of course, reluctant to share their supply plans, which would help with that, partly because they feel a need to keep the information from their competitors, but they also fear that retailers will hold back if they expect supply to be strong, and will hoard if they expect supply to be weak. And naturally, suppliers should expect retailers to behave that way. I'm going to argue that they shouldn't fear it. They should just learn to manage those reasonable decisions manage the impact of those reasonable decisions by retailers. Retailers often have the first view on what consumers are buying. They are often reluctant to share that information with suppliers because all too often suppliers use that to try to persuade the retailer to buy more than is appropriate sooner than is appropriate for them to be bringing it in. I don't know how many of you retailers have ever experienced that. I'm guessing it's most all of you. So in building trust, sharing information is a great place to start. I mean, it's really an essential building block of building trust over time. Understanding the nature of planning that's possible by one's partners is key to learning to better make one's own plan, because your own plan only makes sense if it fits in some sense in with your partner's plans. And developing that skill of building your own plan is a key to making joint plans. And these are all things that we all need to be thinking about. We all need to be working on. And yeah, find out how, what information can you share without feeling at risk, because starting to do that, these first steps are so important, even as they are difficult and scary. One of our topics today, model changeovers. Planning for model changeovers is one of the most important areas for joint planning. There need to be some leftovers when the new models come in. If there weren't some leftovers, we would have been completely out, and there would have been missed sales opportunities, underserved and unserved customers in that interim period. But too many leftovers puts a hit onto all of our financial viability. Yes, we need new products. I mean, over the years, I've seen a lot of new. Every now and then I'll see a bike come in that I sold back in the mid-'70s, and it's still in great shape because for whatever reason, that one never got ridden. And I look at that bike, which I thought at the time was, wow, this is a good bike. And I look at it and say, boy, this was a piece of junk we were selling back then. I mean, today, if there were a brake that performed like the Campy Super Record brake of the late 70s, that would never see a spec even on our cheapest bike. I mean, that performance is just so far back there, so inadequate today. As I aged through my 40s and 50s, the distance and speed that I could ride kept getting better because of the improvements in the bikes. And I'll use an e-bike for commuting to work, but when I go out riding for fun, I just want to pedal, and because the bikes are just so darn much fun in a way that the bikes I rode when I was 20 years old would not be today. Those bikes were heavier than some of the e-bikes we have now. The most potent words for bringing customers into your store are new and sale. So with a properly managed model changeover, we can advertise them both at once. If it's well coordinated, it can really be a big boon to our business. When it's not, of course, everybody suffers. We all we're trying to all shift the burden onto people that should be our partners. It just falls apart. So getting this right is really a huge key to our success. And we need to make sure that the opportunities for model changeovers, together with the pain of model changeovers, both get shared in an equitable and profitable way, so that we can all be successful. We need to also just better appreciate the amazing things that our partners do for us. We need to take the fear of what they're going to do out of the equation and just learn to better manage together the inevitable and difficult stretches in building this industry that all of us love so much. And that's it for me for today.
Thank you, Peter. It's a great way to open this up, reflecting on the trust and the idea of this group to bring an opportunity for great understanding. If you are participating as an attendee and you look at the panel members, we have representatives from brands, suppliers, distributors, data collection agencies, our partners with websites and point of sale systems. So it's retailers. So it's really a great representation of a collective voice of the industry. And reflecting back on our summit event, which was held in Bentonville, Arkansas, we do want this to be a safe place. It's easy to be on your own island and working on your business, but getting us all together where we can, as a collective group, work on and understand what everyone's needs are, so we can all work together. That's truly what we're trying to do. So thank you for that, Peter. And let's move forward now. We have 3 topics for exploration today as a group. And we have found these topics from a response to our members and to our panel members and industry at large, asking for topics for this group to discuss. The 3 topics were selected by our committee members, and how the forum will progress today is I will introduce the topic question. Our panel members who have volunteered to speak on the items will talk, and then we'll allow for an open dialogue between our panel members on anyone else who would like to give comments. And if anyone who's in attendance would like to ask a question or lend insight to the topic, we'll provide time for that. So we do really lean on our attendees to take part. You can use that chat function or the Q&A function. We do want this to be an opportunity for everyone's voice to be heard. So feel free to take part as you see best fit. So let's go ahead and begin with our first topic of exploration today, improving supplier-retailer data collaboration. And the question that was presented are, what are the best practices for sharing data between retailers and suppliers? As Peter just brought up in his introduction, we're in this pre-season time, order planning time, and having great data would make it easier for everyone. So what are the best practices? Our first speaker for today's topic is Peter Woolery from Bicycle Market Research. Peter?
Yeah, thank you, Heather. And thank you to the NBDA for putting these on. These are definitely great to get everyone together and talking on the same page. Where this came from was I was working with a group of running retailers, and they have a similar dynamic with suppliers where there is data flowing at least one direction, and they wanted to make sure that it was a more equitable experience so that the retail also got data flowing back to them, at least in an aggregate sense, or some other way to make it collaborative. So what I wanted to discuss before turning it over to you all to get an idea of what those best practices are is to talk about a few of the good examples that we already have in the bicycle industry and that maybe the specialty run industry or other outdoor spaces don't yet have. One example is with Workstand, right? Formerly Smart Detailing. And they have a podcast called Around the Workstand. And once a month, Ryan Atkinson, who I think is on this call, will go on that podcast and talk about the data that is available or that they saw in the prior month. And coincidentally, I think the NBDA actually released a podcast interview with Ryan about the same data, I think this morning or yesterday. So super good timing there. What's nice about that is Workstand has a large portion of retailers already providing data in the form of their website. into Workstand. And so Workstand just took it upon themselves to aggregate that together and provide that back as here is the pulse of what's going on. And so you have that bi-directional data sharing to hopefully lift everyone together. And then it can be a lot more fresh than some of the other data that's out there. Similarly, if you are a Trek retailer and using Ascend, your data is being aggregated by Trek, certainly to benefit them, but that's to run a better business. And in exchange, they will send out a monthly report. I think it's now called the Ascend HQ Benchmark Report, where they have nearly 1,000 retailers that they aggregate in and provide that data within 2 to 3 weeks of the end of the month to the contributing retailers, again, to help to lift all of the boats. So these are two higher level examples of the overall kind of performance. But then we see other moves, like recently HLC has been putting in a lot of efforts to make it easier for retailers to integrate with them. Likewise, if you're on Lightspeed, you can start to see the HLC inventory on there in your orders. The point here is that there can be bidirectional data sharing that can help in the relationship. In the case of HLC, it really helps their reps to do an even better job of providing that service to the end customer. Ideally, that strengthens the relationship between suppliers and retailers so that they do more business. So there's a lot of opportunities there where the best reps that I've worked with in the past are the ones who were reaching out and checking to see if there were stockouts and making sure that the things that we sold best, they were keeping that flowing in. They weren't trying to overstock us. They were really trying to avoid those situations where we weren't selling the product because we didn't have it. So there's good opportunities there. So I wanted to turn it over to the rest of the participants and panelists here. What are the good examples that you see or some pitfalls that we can avoid in making this a better collaborative environment so we can all prosper together?
Peter, thank you so much for that. And I did share the links to the Workstand podcast and the one that was done this morning with Ryan, and both great examples. And I appreciate this topic. Panelists, anyone would like to chime in on examples that you have seen that would be leaders, or just your thoughts on this topic? Wow. Okay, Rob from Bulls Bikes.
Thanks, Heather. So what I would say is at a grassroots level, data sharing can be as simple as your reps sharing with you as a retailer what their best sellers are that you may not be selling in your store. Obviously, there's geographic differences, there's differences within each store. But when I was a rep and when I was managing and still managing reps, I felt that our ability to share data and share information and insight was one of the things that elevated us in terms of being more than just a salesperson. Being able to say, this is selling really well in the town 50 miles away, similar demographic, you might give it a shot, I think is a pretty powerful grassroots type of data sharing. On a higher level, People for Bikes buys data from Circana and publishes that data. And most of the brands on here, I think, are members of People for Bikes. And I know that I, as a brand leader, have shared that data. We're not supposed to share the actual data source, but to share sell-through data and inventory data about bike categories. I think as a retailer, getting that insight can really help you get more of a global look or a national look at the market. And I think that's another way that data sharing can be very valuable. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob. Fantastic points. Ryan Atkinson from Workstand. Nice to have you on the call.
Thanks for having me, Heather. I think Rob mentioned this on, the reps can do data sharing on a one-on-one basis with dealers, and the same can be, that could be reversed. I think that from what I know of dealers that I've worked with, their most effective conversations with suppliers are when they have data to back up the conversations. I think I hear that most related to the open to buy software that we have, where a retailer can really understand how their inventory is moving and be able to have an informed conversation about why product X might be moving better than product Y. It really grounds the conversation and makes it really less personal. The other thing, I don't recall if it's been brought up, but I think the most valuable data for the typical retailer today is their inventory data. And so making sure that you have a computerized point of sale system, you're tracking your inventory, you're connected with companies like Workstand or Locally or Beeline Connect, so that in this world where the market is starting to include more D2C business, that your inventory is available to sell in multiple places. So really, that there's no change in the course of consumer behavior. And the best thing you can do is get your inventory to suppliers. You hear all the time from suppliers that they really do want to sell from your stock, but you've got to give them the tools to do that.
Excellent. Any other panel members wish to talk on best practices that actions retailers could take, maybe get that inventory to suppliers, or actions that suppliers could take, maybe making sure that those reps have that insight? As Carrie Von Korper just put into chat, it's very valuable to her to get the top 10 per category, let's say, from her reps. Anyone else wish to speak on this topic? Chad?
I think I think Peter alluded to it a little bit earlier about, the transparency of data and retailers needing, excuse me, a little bit more data from the vendors. That's a little more than just we have +5 or 5+ of these. Peter gave the example of running industry, and I've seen some of the data coming from vendors in the run industry where a retailer can actually plan out their entire year because they can see this curve of expected inventory to come in, a little bit more transparency on when it's going to sell out, when there's going to be dates of when that inventory is going to completely drop off of their price protections, and then also, promotions throughout the year. Because what currently happens, and some vendors are really good at it, but in a lot of cases, the retailer gets maybe a 30-day notice or maybe even a 15-day notice of when stuff's going on sale. And then they have to create this, some sort of event or marketing pieces to push those promotions. And it's almost impossible. So I think it is a two-way street where we need to see the data coming both ways, retailers giving the data, which I'm super supportive of, but also vendors pushing their information back to the retailers so they can make educated decisions.
Excellent. Thank you, Chad. Love the collective thought process here. Benton, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. A couple things, Chad, I 100% agree. And as a representative of QVP, I can say we've got a lot of opportunity in some of those aspects, right, in planning things in the future with the number of SKUs that we carry. The one thing I wanted to add, Ryan, kind of to add on to what you have, is the best practice for retailers is the ability to consume some of the data that is available. I know that you've talked a bit about making sure inventory is available online, but a lot of those feeds, quite honestly, speak above my knowledge level on how APIs and things like that work. But I run into a lot of situations where I think some of the inventory information that you're looking for might be available, but the consumption rate or consumption ability at retail, I don't think is understood. Certainly fall into the not understood bucket of that. But that's something I think maybe for a future conversation we could dive into further. Or Ryan, even a company like yours can help retailers understand as a best practice, because some of that's there for sure.
Thank you, Benton. We have a retailer attendee who would like to speak as well. Chain Reaction Bicycles.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Yeah, I was just curious because back in the day when suppliers reps actually did their job and they communicated with the salespeople, they communicated with credit, and they were prepared when they came to our stores. They would look at our sell through. You guys know what sell in is, but you don't know the sell through until it either becomes a crisis or 90 or 120 days later when the bill's due, or if the customers aren't reordering. So my thing is let's get the reps to come into the stores and figure out what's going on. I mean, and we need to communicate so that, you know, if I've sold through the inventory and I didn't pay you, that's a problem. If I bought a lot from you and I didn't sell anything, that's a problem. Well, those problems can be recognized sooner than later. And the rep that comes in our store is the key. Or if you don't have a rep that comes to our store, asking those questions and getting to those answers so you can get visibility on what we're selling, what we're not selling, and then you can make plans accordingly sooner. I just see a big deficit in that person that's getting paid to serve your company and serve us, not doing a very thorough job.
Thank you, Phil. I appreciate that you brought up that sell-through point, and I do see a lot of people just thinking about what you're saying and processing. Jay Townley from Human Powered Solutions.
Thank you, Heather. I agree with everything that's been said. This is an excellent conversation. Starting, Peter, thank you very much for your comments, and Ryan, and also what we just heard from Chain Reaction. I think all of it collectively, and by the way, I'm sorry if I left anybody out, but I think collectively, we as an industry have to understand something that Heather and I have just begun to talk about. But at a higher level, where we do strategy, which Peter was discussing, and where I think the planning process for what we're talking about right now, down to the dealer level, that Phil was referring to and Peter's referred to, needs to improve dramatically. And it's got to do it as quickly as we can begin to put the pieces together. Because what's occurred here, if you're not aware, and some of you are, the environmental and the geopolitical risk factors have all pulled together so that the risk profile that we now deal with from a planning standpoint is far more complex, to the point where, and I'll paraphrase this, but I was born in 1943. I started in a bike shop in 1957. I went to work for Schwinn in 1966. So I want you to look at those dates in time, and then we can talk about the rest, but I won't bore you with it. The point is that we now live in the most economically disruptive era since World War II. And this is not just Jay Townley pointing this out. This is now being espoused by economists across the board, by large consulting firms, and it emphasizes the fact, now, again, I'll repeat that. This is the most economically disruptive period since World War II. And the factors that are now being put in the risk profile are going to have to work down to those of us on this panel and others we reach out to in this industry, begin to shape this risk profile so that Phil, from the standpoint of the rep walking in, now let's get the reps back in or get the companies back in, are communicating effectively with the retailer and vice versa. With everything that Rob and others have talked about on this panel. And as I said, I just simply want to emphasize that this is very, very important. It's risen up as becoming more important as those of us at the level that deal with trends begin to realize that we've got to up the game, in simple terms. Yeah. And I'll end it with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah, highlighting that we need to minimize the risk for a retailer and supplier, and using all of the data available to us to make very wise, smart decisions for everyone moving forward is very important. I love this conversation. I think we've just touched on a little bit here. Let's keep it going. Ryan?
I'll just conclude. And, you know, we're at our company, we're starting to test incorporating AI technology into what we're doing. And I bring that up because for me, it's incredibly daunting. I don't really understand it, despite the best efforts of our developer team. And there may be some listeners here who are not super familiar with digging into your own data. So I would just encourage you to explore, experiment. The whole industry needs to do the same thing. I would say if we surveyed, 100 suppliers, there's maybe 20% of them that are really good at even understanding their own data, let alone the market data. And so we're all in this together. But it is a pivotal part of a successful and profitable business moving forward. And so I hope we all are willing to dive in and learn.
Yeah, I would say an easy first step for for brands and retailers on the call or listening would be just start those communications of what was purchased last year, the year prior, what their current inventory is at retailer level, just looking at that sell-through and then how we continue to share this data moving forward. I'd like to come back to Peter as you introduced the topic. Do you have any additional thoughts based on the conversation that you heard just now? Not to put you on the spot, but you know.
Of course. No, it sounds great. I think everyone's on the same page, and it comes down to those first steps of like, what can you do? And I think from both sides, one of the core pieces are those reps in between. And it doesn't necessarily have to be physically visiting. Some shops, yeah, you're going to have to. That's how they operate. But others, it's checking to see what has been selling through. Hey, here's our next initiatives, and keep that line of communication going. And then start to set up, say, automatic emails about what your inventory is from that vendor. I know that Ascend has functionality for that. I'm pretty sure Lightspeed does. If it doesn't, they have APIs so things can be built. But see what small steps you can take in both directions and just keep the communication up. And then that builds up trust so that when we start talking about raw data going across, then people are more trusting of that. Yeah, so at least that's the first step for the people on the call.
Excellent. And Benton, I hope you don't mind if I put you on the spot here, but I did talk with Bill at the summit, and he was mentioning that QBP can provide retailers kind of an overview specific to like geographical sell-in or what some hot items are if a retailer is looking to curate their inventory. Is that correct? And how would a retailer work with your team to get something like that?
Yeah, we we certainly have our finger on the pulse a bit of what's selling where, what's popular where in terms of sell in. To a lot of your points, we don't have feeds on what sell through is, but we, through the sales teams and Phil, I think there is value, and certainly as the head of our sales team, I would love to see our sales rep force grow to the size to be able to walk into every bicycle shop in the United States, but we aren't there yet to have them be the conduit. But in order to conduct that kind of information, you reach out to your sales team if you have one with Q, or even call them the customer service and start asking those questions, and we can guide them in the right direction. So
excellent. Thank you. And I saw Haiti that she posted a question to hosts and panelists about a public report on sell-through and market data that aggregates all the sources. I know there's a bunch of conversation internally in the industry on this, but I don't know if there's anything yet. So any panel members who might want to chat on that. Oh, Ryan, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate you. He did put a note there out to everyone. Any other panelists wish to speak on this topic at this point? That's great conversation. Excellent. This is a great time then to roll into topic 2. As I saw, there was a comment from one of the retailers, Paul Tobio of Rider Bikes Florida, about flowing this into minimizing model years, which is our second topic for exploration. So if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and present that now. The topic 2 is slowing down product releases. The question is, can it benefit the market? And further, with retailers still holding stock from previous generations, could a pause on the product release benefit everyone involved? And how can we better orchestrate product releases to avoid unhealthy market practices? We do have a speaker on this topic, so let me present Rob Kaplan with Bulls Bikes. Thanks, Rob.
Hi, Heather. Thanks so much. I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see me? Good deal. So I'll preface this by saying this is one man's opinion, and to some extent, I feel a bit like I'm preaching to the choir here. I've said this before, that the people that attend the NBDA functions and seminars and events, generally speaking, I think run pretty good businesses. And I guess my ask would be, for those of us that interact with other retailers, we should really strong arm them, is a light way of saying it, into getting involved. And at the very least, listening in on these types of events, joining the NBDA, talking to other retailers, because I really feel that the exponential value of this information, if we can really engage new retailers, can be pretty valuable. So with that, Product releases. How do we stop the madness? So I thought it'd be interesting. I'm one of the older guys in the room. I find that hard to believe, but here I am. To give a brief history lesson for those of you who know this. Obviously, Jay, you wrote the book, but retail sales timing versus product development and production timing. So back in the day, trade shows used to be in January. Why? Well, it was the slowest time of the season. Retailers had just sold their inventory for holiday and generally were slow in business and flush with cash. And suppliers would plan their product introductions so that new products would start flowing in the spring, just in time, JIT, for the selling season. This also, these program and pre-season periods provided valuable data for forecasting purposes. And I think that's the one area that suppliers still get valuable data from pre-seasons. Obviously, in the current environment, pre-seasons are a little bit of a sticky wicket for a lot of people with good reason. Retail sales, as everyone knows, unless you're in Arizona or Florida, are pretty much bunched. The selling season is April through September, as our friends in the upper Midwest and the northern tier like to say, you know, they roll up the sidewalks in October, and generally, if you don't hemorrhage money between November and February, you're doing really well. Brands started these programs because they needed to comp last year. And this created artificial selling events pre-season. And this also entailed the offering of longer and longer and longer dating terms that now, in my opinion anyway, have become one of the bigger issues facing the industry. Factories on the supply side love this because it smoothed their demand cycles. And component suppliers started developing new product introductions to coincide with all this new timing. How did we get here? Because every brand sold out in 20 and 21, ordering to comp this period became the norm. No one wanted to give up any market share or potential share. Scarcity led to an overinflated perceived demand. The one story that I like to tell is back in the early 2000s, Schwinn rebooted the Stingray, and they had a mold for the rear tire that was a proprietary mold, and you could only get it from one factory. And Stingray aficionados or collectors started calling around looking for these bikes. They were scarce, and as a result, people would call 10 stores looking for a bike. All 10 stores registered demand, but it was really one person. The result was demand at 10x. So supply chain transmitted this over demand by showing major lag in lead times. During the pandemic, what was normally a 90-day lead time order to production went to 18 months for some components. Bulls still has bikes that were purchased during this period that are spec'd with suspension components that are not the in-demand suspension components because those brands were oversold in a big way. So we had to make a choice of either getting bikes with great forks, but not the brand name forks that people demand, or not getting bikes at all. And fear of loss resulted in over forecast and over purchase by most all suppliers. We all know this. We're all facing it. All the brands that are certainly on this call and anybody who interacts with brands know this. And you know, the question is, where do we go? So this is just, again, my opinion, but as retailers, you need to manage your suppliers and inventory, not the other way around. You're the brand. You know, Billy Bob's Bike Shop, as I like to say, is the reason consumers go in the store, not because they're carrying Trek or Giant or Bulls or any other brand. Maybe a little bit, but for the most part, consumers come in your door because they trust you. Align with brands that understand this. If you must align with a brand that doesn't seem to understand this, manage the brand. What do you really need? Do you really need to stock all the bikes that your brand wants you to stock? What do your customers really need? Do you need price ladders that have a choice at every $50 or $100 or $200 on a particular bike, rather than every $200 or $500? Back in the day, we used to talk about having draw brands and profit brands. I worked for a brand called Univega. We were definitely a profit brand. What other choice does that brand have? When you're talking to a brand and they're asking you for a major commitment, think to yourself, what if I say no? What if I say, I need this level, this price, but I can only give you this commitment? I can tell you that there's a lot of negotiation that goes on out there. And I think sometimes brands, retailers feel that they don't have power. Unless you're in a market that has multiple choices, that is easy for a brand to go to and open up more competition, you have a lot of power. And then lastly, what do you have to lose by asking at least? It will continue, again, this is my opinion, it will continue to be a buyer's market for the foreseeable future. I think at retail and at wholesale, there will be plenty of supply for the most part, and plenty of deals, at least into 25 and through 25. At Eurobike a couple of weeks ago, I was, to be honest, a little bit surprised by the amount of over inventory the European market still has, and by the lack of promotional pricing that that market undertook. They didn't follow the US market in terms of discounting. They waited a bit. And as a result, they have a lot of inventory. There was some suppliers that I talked to that said they had 2, 3, 4 years worth of inventory at their current run rate. So I think it's going to be a buyer's market. I think most suppliers would agree with that. Exceptions are new product introductions, but even that demand is at risk, in my opinion, by promotional pricing pulling sales away. Does a consumer really want to spend $10,000 on the newest, greatest, sexiest road bike, mountain bike, EMTB, whatever it is? Or will they accept what was previously a $10,000 bike at $6,000 because it's a great deal and it's still an amazing bike? Assort with this in mind. Do you really need to stock full size runs of every model? Do you really need to have your price ladders so close? And then the last thing I'll just talk about, because I feel pretty passionate about this, everyone gets, I won't say balled up, but concerned about freight on special orders. I'm a big fan of special orders. I think the smart move in retailing these days is to keep your inventory lean and lean into special orders. And don't worry about the freight cost. If you think about it, the return on invested capital on a special order bike that makes you 20 or 30% is better than the return on invested capital on a bike that you've had in inventory for 6 or 12 or 24 months that you make 35 or even 50%. And this is just a little blurb in there. Look up Jim Roy. For those of you who don't know how to calculate it, figure it out and live by it, because that's what's going to make your business profitable. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's
I
see,
know
end to show. How do I unshare? Pause.
I went ahead and we got you. We got
Okay.
it.
All right.
I know you spent a lot of time working on that presentation, and I know you feel very strongly about supporting retailers and brands alike in the industry in general. So I thank you so much for your comments there. There was one question I saw in the chat. James Moore wanted you to clarify the use of the word comp.
Comp. Yeah. So comp is if you did $100,000 last month, you want to do $100,000 next year the same month. That's comp sales. And in retail, the common phrase is, are you comping to last year? And if you've opened up new stores, it's same store comp sales. So for a brand, are we comping to last year? James, for your store, are you comping to the same month last year?
Excellent. Thank you, Rob, for that clarification. So the topic, slowing down product releases, and Rob talked about that, and also about the current state of the inventory situation, new models coming out. Any other panel members wish to give your thoughts on the slowdown of model years or product releases. This was submitted by retailer Buchika's Bike and Ski up in New Hampshire. And Todd unfortunately wasn't able to attend today. Peter, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that this idea of slowing down the pace at which we have new models, and particularly when we're talking about core models, makes a lot of sense, right? The recent data that we've seen from the National Sporting Goods Association and from People for Bike Survey both point toward growth in ridership, but a lot of casual ridership. And so these aren't necessarily riders or consumers who are really looking at those edges as well. So we don't need to have constant changes in our, hardtail mountain bikes or our commuting bikes. Those are the types of things where when you get into the core consumers at those edges, then, okay, yeah, we can have iterations, but that should really come down to the technology and not just model years. So thankfully, as Rob pointed out, there seems to be a lot of focus on slowing things down and getting it back into control. And I think Robbie did a great job of explaining that bullwhip effect that we're all sort of riding through right now.
Thank you, Peter. I really appreciate the additional insight. Ryan Atkinson of Workstand.
Slowing down product releases. There was at the Bicycle Leadership Conference earlier this year, there was a speaker from Silicon Valley who was up. He said something like, the bike industry is addicted to innovation. And in part because it's the one way that the industry knows how to stimulate sales. And I guess I would love that not to be true, but the reality is when we see it in the numbers, like when there's a new product released, it immediately drives sales. So I don't know if the trade-off is worth it to slow the release cycle down. Model years, I absolutely get that, but innovative new product drives sales at retail. Peter, you do a lot of work in the used bike market and had a lot of put a lot of thought into how that impacts bike shop sales. So I don't know if I'd stand behind slowing down innovation.
I appreciate the thought, Ryan, and I'm thinking about Trek's reduction in their models recently. Maybe it's something like that, getting down to core models. All just food for thought. Let's keep the conversation going. Benton Hunt of QVP.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to pull on the string that I think Ryan started pulling on too. I kind of line in the middle. I agree with slowing it down and not slowing it down at the same time. I think it's a delicate balance. As a retailer, one of the reasons that a consumer goes to your store is that it's new and different and lively. And so, Peter, I agree that fringe tech heavy product has to be updated. Some of that's out of the manufacturer of the bike's control, and some of that isn't in terms of suspension tech and everything else. But as a consumer, if I look outside a bike, I'm a runner, I want to go into a store and see something new than I saw 6 months ago. And if I don't, that store starts to become fairly irrelevant unless they are community builders, unless they have some other way, as Rob, as you've called out, right? They are the brand in that particular instance, but dusty product doesn't spur sales either. So I think that it is a really delicate balance to make sure that we are, as both supplier and retailers, facing together. Plus, new product does spur old product sales. I personally buy all of my trail running shoes 1 year old because I think, as Heather and Chad probably know, you can get them at 50% discount at that point in time, right? And so there's a balance there too, to how to win with older inventory as newer innovation brings demand potentially back into your stores, that I think is important to consider as opposed to full halt.
Thank you, Benton. I see a couple more hands up. Chad Picard, P2 co-moderator.
I think I'm going to go a little deeper on what Ryan said. Working with lots of retailers in the P2 program, the one thing I've seen over the years, and also from owning a business in the industry for over 20 years, is that we've had what I feel is an inventory heavy industry at all levels, at the wholesale level and at retail as well. And bringing the new products is important, not, new wheel sizes that allow you to ride different terrain or faster, new mini tools and all of that stuff does get people. It is a type of customer that gets them excited. What we need to do so that retailers can be flexible, and vendors as well, is we need to turn our inventory more We're seeing, you know, the ski industry usually does like 1.5 turns, which is horrible. Industries or retailers that are turning their inventory 4 and even 5 times are showing, you know, their money's not wrapped up in their inventory, so they actually can buy those new releases and probably less complaining about a new model year or a new color, because they're in that position where they can make a purchase and pivot to meet the customer's needs.
Excellent thoughts there. Oh, Peter Henry, NBDA Board Chair. Oh, Peter, one more time. Not yet. Sorry. I wish I could unmute for you.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, now how about now?
Perfect.
Okay, so I really liked Rob's presentation. It's a lot of the same stuff that I kind of lived by for many years. And when you run that lean inventory, then you really don't give a hoot when they introduce new products. It's almost always good news when they do. It's a matter of decision. If you keep saying, oh, I got to try to get my turn up, I got to try to get my turn up, you're probably never going to do anything. You have to decide what turn you're going to achieve and just be disciplined about it. And, you know, if you've been turning at 1.8 and you want to get to 4, you're not going to do that in 3 months. It'll probably take a year or 2 to get your inventory where you want it, because you just can't discipline your customers. They don't buy what you want them to buy. They buy what they want to buy. And but if you you know, plan to get there gradually, and you can see, okay, so here's how much I'm going to need to buy each month. You kind of know how much you're going to sell each month, because it's going to be kind of like what you did last year. And so you know where that's going to go, and you can plan for that. And if you share with your vendors what that means, at least they'll say, okay, I wish you're going to buy more sooner, but I see where you're going. So when I get what sales I get, I'll understand what it means. And I know that we're going to be working together, and you're going to be stronger into the future, and that you'll welcome it, and you'll be ready to buy plenty of the new stuff when I come up with new stuff. And that's just a huge part of it. And that's kind of what I mean by planning together. You have to first know how to put together your own plan, manage your inventory towards where it needs to be, and share that with your supplier and let them know what you need from them to make your business successful. And yeah, just keep plugging at it. And even if you don't do it well the first year, just keep learning from it and do it better the second year. And in time, you'll have a good, strong business with good, strong partners. If they don't support you in that, get different partners.
Thank you, Peter. We'll take a couple more comments here. Jerry Lawson of Frog Bikes.
Okay, so I totally agree that we shouldn't be changing model years every year. The challenge you have as a brand is that your R&D cycle is very long. For us to bring out a new product is 3 to 4 years. So it's much better if people are developing it. Challenge from a consumer is, and what brands find is, consumers want the latest tech. Somebody already mentioned it. So it's how you balance that balance. If Shimano, let's use as a brand who brings out a new tech to be on road bikes, you as the brand manufacturing the bike want to put that road bike tech onto your next road bike. And we've got to work out how we get the whole industry to talk about not doing it every year. You don't want to be behind your competitors. The last bit of the puzzle is, as a brand, brands really get behind the new model. So you see the pros riding the road bike today in the Tour, and you think, well, I want that because that's whoever's winning, they've got the latest tech. And that sort of drives the demand from the consumer. So somehow we've got to marry up what the consumer wants because they see it on the tech or see what the pros are riding versus what's sensible from a retailer's point of view. So the final bit of the puzzle is, do we produce less product every year? So instead of creating an excess, do we create demand to run out? much earlier. And then we create demand, more people go into the shops, more people are desperate to buy it, and then they'll be too late. And who knows what the answer is? I'm up for any decision that helps us all.
Jerry, I appreciate that. I feel like it brings us back to our topic number one, right? Using that data. Fantastic conversation. Rob Kaplan, back to you, Bulls Bikes.
So just for clarification, I do not advocate not bringing in a new product or not leaning into innovation. I think it's absolutely critical. But to Jerry's point, I do think that having less supply of that new product creates demand. There's a brand out there that the ladies might know called Zara, and it's a Spanish clothing company that literally plans to run out of every single thing they make. And that's the way they've built their business. And they have I think over 1,000 stores across the world now. And it's not likely that the bike industry is ever going to go there. But I think there's something to be said to plan to run out. When we were owned by the Dutch back in the Excel days, the Dutch were very happy to say, be happy to be sold out, be proud to be sold out. Now, the way they had made us forecast, that didn't actually happen. But I think as a brand or as a retailer, running out of something once in a while is not the worst thing in the world. Thank you.
Excellent. Fantastic reference to Zara as well. We do love that store. Eric Peterson, Go Cycle.
Thanks. Sorry. I was going to say to Rob, I know Zara as well, having been there in lots of countries. So
you're a fashion plate, Eric.
Yeah, can't you tell? And honestly, the concept of planned obsolescence is an interesting discussion that could probably take a little bit longer as we're on here. I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about was, one, I think the first two conversations we've had are tied together, whether it be communication between brands and retailers, as well as the new models. And I see lots of head shaking, so that makes me feel good about that. But I think also it's an understanding of kind of the product adoption cycle. We talk about where the consumer is on a product adoption cycle, and as a manufacturer, you do need to innovate. You've got to have those halo products that draw that attention to your brand, while you still have those bread and butter products that are being sold every day, and that is a key. Jerry's point to say people want to ride what they're seeing on Discovery Channel or whatever network is showing Peacock now, I guess, in the US with the tour. But you have to understand, you've got those customers that are always going to buy the newest, latest, and greatest. And that's a very small percentage. And it can be a long forward tail on your product adoption cycle. And then you've got those fast followers that see that product out in the marketplace, and they're like, okay, that's pretty cool. I might want to get on that too. And then there's this concept of crossing the chasm, where you get from those fast followers and early adopters kind of into that mass adoption of whatever product or tech you've got. And that's still early. And I wish I had the graph with me that I could pop up there. But, it's a concept of a bowling alley where one person who you may identify with as a consumer buys that product. Well, you're the lead, you're the one pin in the bowling alley. And once you get knocked over, all of those other bowling pins that kind of look like you get knocked over too. And then you're going to get more of that adoption of that product. And then you get into mass, and then all of a sudden that's the gravy piece. But to Jerry's point, once you get into that mass adoption of your product, you're probably 2 years into the development cycle of the product that you're talking about replacing it with. And now we're going to throw on to that we had, that little bump in the road called COVID. And then we had all of the supply chain issues that went into it, where you couldn't get product for your development. And suddenly we're looking at, a lot of new, quote, innovation that's basically been on the back burner. And then you throw that in with the concept of kind of pulling the demand curve forward as opposed to expanding the demand overall, which may have been the case. There was an excellent podcast series on that in the bike business to begin with. And that's kind of where we're at right now. And I think it goes back to that first topic you had, which is communication. You're really understanding where the shops are and where the brands are. And I'll take 2 seconds to sidebar into my previous life when I was in retail at Target. We would plan out, Target would plan out with their suppliers. Now, no, consumer products, bikes being one of the products that they may have in their stores, they're going to plan out an annual promotional schedule. They're going to plan for that obsolescence at the end. They're going to start with the end in mind. So what are they going to do with that leftover inventory? What does that look like? What are we going to do to clear that out so we can bring in next year's product, so we can free up our open to buy, so we can free up our inventory space, so we can take that vacation when we're, as Rob said, flush with cash and don't have the sales coming in the door. And so that, I think, is a worthy part and a worthy topic of conversation as well, between the retailers and the brands, to say, what does your promotional schedule look like? What is your plan for getting this out? And how can I work that into my schedule as well? So.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. Great topic, and we could just keep going on. I'm going to do one more topic, or one more point here from one more speaker, and then we'll move to topic 3. Jay Townley, Human Powered Solutions.
I'll make this brief because I know we have to move along, but I appreciate what everybody has said, Jerry and Eric in particular, from the standpoint of the brand side. Rob, as a comment though, what you guys have talked about, what this panel has talked about, is primarily the acoustic market, the pedal bike market. We now live in 2 markets. The consumer will decide, and we've got a pretty good idea because we've lived it for decades, some of us, what the pedal bike market's all about. What's new and what's affecting us is the e-bike market. And Rob, you're in this up to your neck. That's your product line. The e-bike market, for those of us that have studied it, is totally different. And we are just beginning to understand that consumer, and they are not the acoustic bike consumer. So I'll leave it with that. It goes to the point, though, that I agree, all of this is connected. And we need to have a robust conversation, drawing more people in the industry in, because it's no longer your father's Oldsmobile, folks. We're now dealing with a market that has this component of, yeah, there's not a lot of e-bikes in the US market, but look at the dollar value, which is affecting our economics.
Excellent. Thank you, Jay. Lots to think about here. We'll continue to move on then. Today's 3rd topic is ensuring the safety and addressing the independent bicycle dealers' vulnerability with home-assembled direct-to-consumer bikes. And further, it states, how can we ensure safety and protect shops with the rise of direct-to-consumer bikes being assembled at home by untrained individuals? So that is a threat. These bikes do come into the retailer stores, in most cases not assembled fully or correctly, and not all cases, but in most cases, or could be. We have 2 speakers, and we'll open it up for some general topic. The first speaker is James Moore, past NBDA president, James Moore, Moore's Bicycle Shop in Hattiesburg. James?
Hey guys, thanks for the time. I want to use 20 seconds of my 5 minutes to give us a brain break. Friday, a lady came into the store to buy a used wheel. She said she wanted to do something with her chickens. She sent us a video Friday evening. Saturday morning, we put it on our Facebook.
That's great.
It has been shared 3,000 times. It's got over 20,000 reactions, and it's been viewed 1.7 million times. So,
to the chickens.
Yeah, you just never know. And there's something very satisfying about watching that over and over again. Now, I've been in business for 40 years, and I've always had an emotional tug whenever someone would bring in something that was mail ordered into my shop for me to install or work on. Then it became the internet, and I would have that same sense of failure when the customer brought that box in to my store. I've gone the gamut from refusing to service on items that were purchased online to imposing punitive prices on items that were purchased online. Neither of those reactions changed customer behavior. Neither of them left me with a good feeling at the end of the day. But over the last couple of years, we've arrived at something that seems to be a win for the customer and a win for ourselves. If someone brings in a home assembly bike to be serviced for whatever reason, we determine, first of all, if it is a home assembly. We have a clever little way of doing that. I look at the bike as I check it in and say, wow, cool bike. Did you put this together yourself? And they proudly say, yeah. And then I look at the bike. I spot a couple of issues that are always easy to see. I point out to the customer, in addition to the reason you brought it in, I see a couple of safety issues. So what I'm going to do is to sell you our safety, our assembly safety check. It runs $25. We will check everything on the bike as if we had assembled it ourselves. I will correct the things that I see. I will also correct the things that I'm not able to determine until I have actually put some tools on this bike to check torque and so forth. And at that point, then I will now look at the items you brought it in for, the adjustments of the gears, adjustments of the brake, the flat tire, or whatever. It's two separate different processes. And it's gone from a situation that was confrontational to a situation now, just because of the way that we present it, it's a win-win. The customer appreciates the fact that I can look at the bike in the stand without even putting a tool on it and point out that the pedals are only screwed halfway in, the fork is backwards. I can take the handlebar with my thumb and forefingers and put the front wheel between my legs and gently twist the handlebar 90 degrees. When they see those things, a light bulb goes on and says, I could have really gotten hurt on that. And at that point, they're happy to have us do this professional safety assembly check, in addition to the items that we brought in, which we add on top of that charge. We charge $25 for this for standard bikes. We charge $35 for e-bikes because they're a little bit more difficult to work with. But basically, it's checking the orientation of the fork, checking the torque on everything, pedals, stems, seat bolts, all these little things like that. Checking the brake shoe position, torque, the seating of the tires, derailleur hanger alignment. It's bent half the time when it comes in. And again, this does not take the place of an assembly. These are for bikes that have actually been assembled by the customer and have seen some ridership when they come in for other service. If someone comes in with a bike that they've ordered online, partially assembled, then we just charge them for a complete assembly, which can run from $75 to $175. My staff have found that this is an easy conversation to have with the customers. It's profitable for us. And I would say over 95% of the e-bikes that come to us for an initial service also need and get the service added to the ticket. So that's pretty much it, unless you have questions.
Thank you, James. And I see that we are, if you're listening to this podcast eventually or just listening, we will have this webinar on our YouTube channel tomorrow, and you can actually see this safety checklist up here on the screen that James has made for his store.
I'll add the reason that I have the screen with two identical sections. I print this out in portrait mode on an 8.5 by 11 or landscape mode. We cut it in half, and we actually tape a copy of this checked out to the handlebar of each bike so the customer knows what was done. And so the mechanic does not overlook something. And in selling this, I explained the reason for it. Well, all I need is this. I said, I realize that, but I can visibly see some safety issues. So I'm going to sell you this for the benefit, for the safety of yourself or your family member, for the liability protection of my business, and for the safety of the mechanic that will work on this bike, test ride it, and then the other mechanic who will test ride it as well. And when it's explained to them in that way, all resistance seems to go away.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Let's go ahead and move to our speaker number 2. Rob Kaplan from Bulls Bikes will present on this topic as well.
So thanks, Heather. And James, all of my speaking points basically mirror what you just showed on your screen. So I really love that form and the fact that you're charging $25 for that. I think it's a brilliant solution to a real problem in the industry. And from my perspective, it comes down to education. And that's really what you're doing. You're educating the consumer about what goes into a proper bicycle assembly. You're showing them why direct consumer is not the same as what you offer, both in terms of product and in terms of service and support. And then you talk about why your value proposition is a reasonable one, so that even if the consumer does have a bike that they bought direct consumer, that they at least think about coming to your store the next time around. I think it's also important as a retailer to know your limits. I see a lot of retailers that do work on especially direct consumer e-bikes that are not necessarily easily fixable. And they get into what I call the black hole of time by interacting with a factory on the consumer's behalf and not getting compensated for that time. So I think you really need to make sure you and your staff know your limits and know what you can and can't do. And again, explain those limits in a respectful, educational way. And then obviously charge for what you know, not for what you do. We talk about that a lot. I know that this is a pet project of Chad. He talks a lot about all that in all the NBDA seminars that I've ever attended. I think it's a really important topic. And I think it's very important for all retailers to charge for what you know, not what you're doing, and be proud of it. There's a reason that bicycle specialty survives in this age of direct consumer and mass market. If you think about it, it's one of the few specialty retail channels that is still, in theory, thriving across the world, let alone the country. It's because of mechanical competency, because of all the knowledge that all of you have in your heads and in your fingertips, and you need to be proud of it and charge accordingly. Also, make sure you follow battery safety protocols. This is especially important when people are bringing in electric bikes that they bought online. There's a lot of news these days about fire safety and battery safety. And the last thing you want to do is get your store in a situation where you are just trying to, do the consumer a favor, and you put the battery in the store, and for whatever reason, it was not a quality battery, and or you tried to charge it for the consumer. Just make sure you follow battery safety standards. Jay will be happy to outline those for you. And last but not least, it's okay to say, no, we can't do that. I think as a specialty retailer, again, be proud of what you know, and be proud to draw a line and say, that's just not something that we're comfortable doing. Sort of, I assume, like James and James's staff would do if a consumer said, but I just want you to do X. I don't want to pay for $25. I know I assembled it properly. Be proud to say no. That's right. That's right. Thanks. That's all I got.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, and I appreciate the panel's expert minds on this. This was brought to our attention by retailer Carrie Von Corper of Papa Wheelie Bicycles in California. And she actually is in attendance and did put into the chat just a follow-up question. And James, I see your hand up. She wants to know what happens if the consumer refuses the safety check. And then James, also any additional comments you have. Oh, James, you're muted. Apologies.
That used to happen a lot when I didn't have a policy. I would just start trying to throw some prices out. Now that I have this policy, which I explain up front, it almost never happens that they refuse the service. And if they do refuse it, I very politely help them carry the bike back to the back of their car. They see the value in this when I'm able to show them. The most recent scenario, the wife brought the grown son's bike in that the father had tried to assemble. She explains to me that he's a professional retired racer, so he knows how to do this. She immediately gets dad on the phone, and I ask for his concerns, and I make note of them. And he says the other issue is he says his feet are hitting the pedals, but that's just because he won't keep his feet where I tell him to. I said, and it could be because the fork is backwards also, putting it 4 inches closer to his feet. Oh, so embarrassing. So there's a way to gain tremendous credibility with the customer if you do this process right. And one point to Rob's talk about charging, I don't charge based on how long it takes me to do something. I charge based on how long it would take you to do it. And the fact that you're in my parking lot with the bike in your car tells me you couldn't do it at all. So the big calculator comes out in that situation.
Excellent. Thank you, James. We'll take a couple more comments here. Jerry Lawson, Frog Bikes, thank you.
So I'm just liking what James just said about what he various doing things. It just made me laugh. Simple solution. This is about how you deal with the problem, not actually dealing with stopping the problem. So we have instigated across all of our retailers that if we find a retailer is sending a bike out unbuilt to a customer, they will no longer be a retailer of ours. But we've got to get other brands to do that, because fundamentally, we want to be promoting what you guys do and how important you and retailers are. So I think that's what we have to try and do to the brands and people who are selling online is fine, but you have to sell it fully built. Because we found some of our retailers were trying to sell it out in a smaller box, not take it out of a bigger box, not send it to the customer built. They're no longer retailers of ours. The other aspect is, James, I love your form. I'm going to share you a link to what the UK has, is because any mechanic who is trained in the UK and in a few other markets, they have this PDI, which is a pre-delivery inspection checklist. And that's an official form signed off by somebody who is trained as a mechanic. So I don't know if in the US you have official qualifications to become a mechanic, but in parts of the UK and Europe, you have to be qualified to do this. And this is, I'll just put it in the link. This is exactly what the UK and further afield mechanics have to sign off, which proves A, how good they are and they've been trained, and B, this is an official thing that advised to give to the customer to say, who did your check, proves it's your model and all those sort of things. So it has been built in the proper way.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Love the feedback here and the continued thought pattern. Chad Picard, P2 co-moderator. And Chad, you are muted as well. It's a default. Sorry, friends.
Busted. Thank you. I wanted to expand a little bit on what Rob said, and that is, the retailers valuing and the mechanics valuing what they do is a critical part of that equation, but also it'd be great to see more vendors valuing what retailers do as far as getting a bike properly assembled with that fork on the right way and bolts torqued the right way. And I'll end it with a question. Do bike vendors know what happens when a customer has a negative experience on a bike because it wasn't set up properly? And I know that I hate to say it, but with the years of owning and working in bike stores, the number of people that have come in and said, I've had this problem, I haven't ridden my bike since. I wonder if we're losing a lot of potential cyclists, or that dip is because a bike's set up wrong, it's the wrong size, the wrong make, the wrong model, or what have you.
Food for thought. Let's keep it going. Thank you, Chad. Yeah, Peter Henry, NBDA board chair. And
right on with everything. Can you hear me?
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Right on with what Chad just said. For retailers in other parts of the country, I believe that James is in a relatively low cost of living part of the country, and you probably need to be thinking at least double that price, if not more, to apply that concept in a great many cities in this country. Probably more in a lot of places.
Thank you, Peter. We have time for one more comment here before we have to wrap it up for today. I saw whose hand was just up? Oh, Rob, you were just up. Yeah. Oh, you're muted now too. Thank you.
I didn't want to take time from Michael, so if you only have time for one more, I'll let Michael go.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate your feedback so far today. Michael.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate that. I just wanted to touch base on what in the e-bike field with what James said. I think it's brilliant, James, what you're doing. I think it's necessary that consumers, I'll share a story in my own shop where consumers come into my shop with a component for an e-bike as well as the bike. They didn't actually have it officially diagnosed anywhere. They just dealt with the retailer themselves where they bought the bike online. Sorry, it was a direct-to-consumer bike. And over 90% of the time, it ends up being a misdiagnosis, right? And then we're at a point where we got to tell the consumer to go back and get the right component off the retailer the direct-to-consumer, wherever they purchased it from the distributor, or we have to deal with the distributor. But we charge a fee to diagnose that bike first, right? We can't rely 100% on the distributors over the phone or over the internet to diagnose a bike. And that really shows the consumers the difference between going to an independent retailer, which we highly recommend, versus purchasing a bike online. So James, I love that you do that. It kind of protects your business as well, keeps the consumers safe and a better experience. And we'll keep them coming back to your shop and then potentially purchase their second bike, realizing they made a mistake in the first place, purchasing their second bike from an independent retailer.
Thank you, Michael. Excellent conversation on this topic, and thank you so much, Carrie, for suggesting it for the panel. Today's conversations have been extremely enlightening. I've been enjoying this discussion since the very beginning. Let's go ahead and turn it over to NBDA board member Kent Cranford for a summary on today's conversation and for some other thoughts as well. Kent?
Hey, everybody. Thank you. And thanks, Heather. Thanks for putting these together. And thanks for everybody that's been on the panel, because I always learn things when I listen to these conversations. Topic one was improving retailer supplier data collaboration, which we didn't go as deep into it as I kind of thought we might. I think the industry knows that it's a desperate problem that we don't have answers for. But what was discussed is that currently the Workstand podcast and the Ascend reports are available to many retailers, one or the other. The Workstand podcast is obviously available to everybody, but Ascend, you have to be a subscriber. Reps sharing at a grassroots level. I mean, Rob's point on that is super valuable when you have good reps. And I think we all lament the days of the great reps, and we also have a few, but communicating with them and taking time for them always makes a big difference. Two-way communication is definitely a must. Retailers need to share more, and manufacturers need to share more about what is happening with inventory and making it where it is more visible on both directions. Sell-through knowledge is critical. Clearly that's been exposed in a massive way in the last 4 years. Minimizing risks for retailers and suppliers could be accomplished with better data sharing, so that both sides of this can be better equipped. It's just the whole data puzzle. How do we overcome it? And what is it going to be? Besides one gargantuan global company that doesn't really care about the bike industry, that controls and owns all of our data, or a fraction of all of our data. Anyway, my opinion there. Topic two, slowing down product releases. Can it benefit the market? I don't know if we really hit the can it benefit the market. We had a lot of conversation about the product releases. Rob's presentation was great about the product cycle and how it happens. And of course, we can all blame Jay for that. We can go all the way back to there and say Schwinn caused it. Obviously slowing down release cycles would slow down sales. And nobody wants to see a model that's been successful changed. Speaking to Benton with the running shoes, I mean, all these runners, they'll buy, once they have a shoe they like, they'll buy 10 pairs of them so that they always have them, especially when they go on sale. And we may have just experienced that with bikes. Everybody bought a bike, and then they bought another bike on sale, and then they bought another bike because why not? Because it was so cheap. So that may be, I think that's one reason that sales are a little slower than they should be as people are are buying. And Jay, I see your thank you. Increasing inventory turns is it's always been the profitable way to run a business. It's also the hardest thing to do, and to be able to predict it, to be able to measure it, and to be smart enough to get rid of the stuff that's not turning, and smart enough to get more of the stuff that is turning. And as a retailer, it was always one of the biggest struggles I ever had, was being able to have that data in my hands in a way that you could work with it, as opposed to just being a look at our yearly turn, which was luck, to be honest. If you had a better way within the industry to see those turns live as they were happening, and being able to react to it. In general, I didn't find there was no clear consensus. Suppliers generally like product releases because it drives sales. A lot of retailers like product releases because it'll drive sales. But in the bread and butter categories, product releases just kind of mess up your inventory flow. And when you had something that was great and selling well, and you did buy a lot of it, suddenly you don't get to make as much money on it. So definitely a lifelong topic for me. Ensuring safety on topic 3, ensuring safety and addressing the IBD vulnerability with home-assisted D2C bikes. James's process of checking in the customer assembled bikes, the assembly, brilliant. James is the master. He is always going to be a guru of anything that's troublesome and cumbersome to deal with a customer. And so we should just all call James if we ever have a question how to deal with that tough customer. Developing the process to educate the customer and not get the resistance is key. Knowing your limits, charge for what you know, and try to charge what you don't know. I had a retailer, an example once was on these things is asking a customer what's their comfort level to pay at $100 an hour. Is it $200? Is it $300? Because that's how long it may take. And usually they would get pushback on that, but I'm sure James has a better technique. Brands need to learn to value, and not all brands. But actually all brands should know this, but value the expertise the shops bring to their consumers. And knowing, maybe being just more aware of it. It seems like that's, as a direct-to-consumer brand, that's probably part of it, is they think they don't need the shops. And we've all experienced that feeling. But it seems like that's kind of coming back around with a lot of the brands, because they're all suddenly looking for retailers to be their partners. And so, again, that's been one of the industry challenges for quite a while. But all in all, those were the highlights that I took out of this. And I'm really glad about the conversations. I wouldn't mind revisiting some of them even in more depth down the road in other seminars. So thanks for your time, and I appreciate it. And I'll give it back to you, Heather.
Excellent. Thank you, Kent. I appreciate your twist on those two, putting in your personal reflection on the conversation as well. Great job with the summary today. Well, always the time goes by so quickly. I appreciate our panel members, our attendees today. The NBDA will have a recording of today's event on our YouTube channel within 24 hours. As I mentioned, we'll also be extracting the audio from today's event and highlight it as a podcast feature in an early August podcast on our Bicycle Retail Radio. We are always welcoming more suppliers, more retailers to the panel. You can email me at heather@nbda.com to participate. Your attendance would be fantastic at the next event, which is set for October 15th, 2024. And with that, I will close it down today. Thank you all again. I appreciate your time so much and appreciate all you do to continue to move our industry forward. Thank you.